Summary of Death by Meeting. A Leadership Fable. By Patrick Lencioni. The story, Casey. Casey McDaniel is founder and CEO of Yip Software. He's a likable, personable guy, but he's not a very inspiring CEO. In fact, he's insipid. He lives where he grew up, in Mount Carmel, California, where his family lived for 50 years. When he was a boy, Casey worked as a caddy on the local golf course. He won a golf scholarship to the University of Arizona and studied electrical engineering and computers. He was a middling student but an excellent golfer, and after graduating he joined the PGA Tour. He won a few tournaments and seemed poised to break through, but contracted a case of what golfers call the yips, a mysterious malady that makes golfers shake when they're trying to putt. He had to leave the tour, and so he invented a virtual golf game. It succeeded tremendously, and Casey started a company called Yip Software to sell sports games. Business boomed. Over the next 8 years, Yip Software released 8 games. Meanwhile, Casey and his wife Patricia produced 4 chips off of the old block. Being family-oriented because of his quartet of children, Casey refused to allow his company to produce terribly violent games, the kind kids love to play. He insisted on realism, innovation, and high-quality sports games aimed at adults and teens who thought of themselves as athletes. Yip was successful, but when you looked at it objectively, it was mediocre. A more dynamic leader would have made a lot more out of the Yip opportunity. The company could have been twice as big. But Casey just was a bit of a dud. He didn't have that drive, that hunger, that passion for success. He was happy to get by, make a little profit and play a little golf. Meanwhile, though, his employees went to conferences and came back awed by the passion and excitement they saw in the representatives of other companies. If only Yip could be like that. They felt like indentured serfs watching knights ride to a tourney in some medieval fantasy. Such passion, excitement and love of business were far from Yip's corporate culture. One day Casey took an unusual step and hired a human resources person named Michelle. Michelle did a study and came to a meeting equipped with data. That sort of thing hardly ever happened at Yip. She said the facts proved that Yip's employees had low morale. Everyone wondered why. Casey said the employees needed a cause to rally around. Sophia, the sales VP, said that perhaps the company should go ahead and make some violent kids' games. Tim Carter, the CFO, said that the employees might think that raises or bonuses would be a good idea. Then Connor, the happy-go-lucky head of marketing, made a comment that kept Casey awake at night. He said he would like to make more money, but had accepted his fate. This cut Casey to the quick. He had always considered himself fair. Fate? He decided to have an initial public offering, IPO, so he could give his employees a share of the financial upside. Then he got a call from J.T. Harrison, the head of business development at PlaySoft, the second biggest video game maker in the country. J.T. said that PlaySoft had specialized in violent kids' games, but their youthful customers were getting older now and Yip might make a nice addition to the PlaySoft portfolio. Casey agreed to sell Yip to PlaySoft if he would have autonomy running Yip, if he could keep his management team intact and if Yip kept its own brand and identity. PlaySoft agreed to the conditions, and naive Casey closed the deal. Bad move, because PlaySoft paid in stock and, shortly after the sale, PlaySoft stock plunged. Broken promise. Not only did PlaySoft stock fall in value, leaving Casey and his stunned employees holding the bag, but J.T. Harrison soon reneged on his promises to let Casey and the management team run Yip autonomously. He scheduled a visit to come and sit in on a meeting. The meeting went on forever and was boring and unproductive. J.T. did not like this at all. He didn't know that boring, tedious, long, unproductive, time-wasting meetings were at the heart of Yip's corporate culture. Everyone hated them and everyone was resigned to them, like souls in the seventh circle of Dante's Inferno. Conversations meandered all over the place and the most important issues were left on the table unresolved. Casey soon got word that J.T. was going to attend several meetings, sometimes calling in advance, sometimes just dropping by. Casey didn't think this was a good idea, but he no longer owned the company. Next, Casey's administrative assistant went on a long pregnancy leave. Casey was able to line up a replacement, Will, the son of someone who knew JT and thought he was a piece of work. Will's friend told Casey that Will was brilliant, and he was. Will had high test scores and was extremely well organized. He'd come up with a new organizational plan for his parents' auto garage when he was only 5 years old, and in junior high he invented a new offense for a high school basketball team. What they didn't mention was that Will had taken medication for a psychological problem in his youth. Thanks to the medication, the problem was more or less under control. More or less. When Will came in for an interview, he was impressive, and he seemed relieved that Casey didn't know too much about his background. Will's disorder was never very clearly diagnosed, but it was a bit like obsessive-compulsive disorder with a dash of Tourette's syndrome for color. Will was fine as long as he took the medication. But one day, he decided he didn't need the medication anymore. Unmedicated, a short time after he joined YIP, Will finally couldn't contain himself and expressed his exasperation by swearing out loud at another long, useless meeting. That was the first alert that something had to change. Meanwhile, Casey confided in Will that he had discovered that PlaySoft's business development guy, JT, was angling for his job as YIP's CEO. Later, Will secretly read Casey's email. JT had been so shocked by the poor quality of the meeting he'd attended at YIP that he had concluded Casey was unqualified to lead YIP anymore. JT had written, "I have rarely seen such an unproductive, uninspired meeting in my career. Meetings make a difference." Will decided to study what makes meetings work so he could help Casey get the meetings and the company back on track. Casey himself decided that meetings had to work better for the good of the company. JT, who was trying to shake things up, but who was not really angling for Casey's job, had recognized a fact that many managers ignore: meetings do matter. A bad, boring meeting is a sign of uninspiring leadership, and a sign that companies are not achieving their potential. Most people hate meetings, but meetings are also necessary. And they can be fun instead of boring. Meetings often have two problems. Boredom. People endure tedious presentations wondering why they have to sit through them when they have so many more important things to do. Ineffectiveness. Meetings don't accomplish anything. Will realize that companies can address both of these problems with the same two solutions: make meetings dramatic and put meetings in context, but only by staying focused. Drama. Drama is about conflict. Think of your favorite movies. Luke Skywalker fights Darth Vader in Star Wars. Chief Brody fights the shark in Jaws. John Nash fights schizophrenia in A Beautiful Mind. The average meeting lasts about as long as the average movie, say 2 hours. There's no reason why a meeting can't have as much drama and conflict as a movie. Begin the meeting by telling the attendees what it is about. What's the story? What are the stakes? Stakes are what people win or lose, so they are important. Stakes give people a reason to care about the conflict and, therefore, a reason to care about the meeting. Many organizations instinctively avoid conflict, but it can be valuable. Look for conflict and learn to harness its energy. The meeting's leaders must channel conflict to prevent it from becoming a wasteful venting of interpersonal spite, but properly used conflict can be creative. Context. Most meetings are pointless because they have no context, no compelling reason to take place. Make your meetings more effective by having more of them and, in some cases, by planning them less. Establish a significant reason for each meeting to exist. 4 kinds of meetings are meaningful: check-in, tactical, strategic and quarterly review. The daily check-in meeting. This meeting takes place standing up and lasts only about 5 minutes. Participants review their plans and intentions for the day. Then they break. Think of it as a football huddle. This meeting should take no more than 5 minutes so it doesn't become a time waster. Weekly tactical meeting. Everyone must attend this 45 to 90-minute meeting, which should follow a disciplined structure. Include these elements. Lightning: each person has 1 minute to state his or her priorities for the week. Review: people review performance against important metrics. The metrics vary by industry, but only 4 to 6 of the most important should be part of the review. Agenda is set the agenda for the period after the review, by which time key issues should be clearly identifiable. Reflect everyone's priorities and performance. Challenge avoid the temptation to take too much time for the lightning round and to set an agenda in advance. It is also tempting to confuse strategic issues with tactical issues. Resist that temptation so your leaders do not end up changing strategic plans because of tactical obstacles. For this meeting, stick to tactics. Monthly strategic meeting. The monthly strategic meeting is the appropriate venue in which to discuss, review, form and change strategy. Strategic meetings should dedicate plenty of time to each topic, as much as 2 hours, so that people feel free to discuss important strategic issues without worrying about deadlines. Strategic meetings are a good parking lot for the strategy issues that come up in weekly tactical meetings. If an issue arises that is too important to wait for a monthly strategy meeting, schedule a special, ad hoc strategy meeting. Otherwise, hold your monthly strategic meetings regularly and allow time on the agenda to discuss what needs to be discussed. Sketch out the agenda ahead of time, but don't crowd it with too many items. Quarterly review. Quarterly off-site reviews have a bad reputation because so many companies have allowed them to become boondoggles, thinly disguised golfing and navel-gazing sessions. Quarterly reviews can and should address such topics as review of strategy. If conditions change and when the facts shift, you should also change your mind and your strategy. Review of team. Managers should look at themselves, how they are working together, whether they need to improve and how they need to improve. Sometimes it's easier to do this away from the quotidian distractions. Review of personnel. Every executive ought to share information about the stars and dogs in his or her area, and comment on stars and dogs in other areas too. This will help keep great employees and overcome the shortcomings of weaker employees. Review of operating environment. Executives should discuss industry conditions, competitive circumstances, and other factors in the business's operating environment. With Will's help, Casey soon implemented the 4-meeting system and tweaked it to fit his company. J.T. Harrison had provoked him to make genuine improvements. Casey gained not only job security, but the luxury of playing a round of golf after work now and then, because his meetings accomplished their goals and ended on time.